Hey, do you teach yoga? Have you ever trained to lead yoga classes, to be a yoga therapist? Have you ever owned a yoga studio? Maybe even just wondered what it was like for the women and men up there in front of the room on their mats, leading you through endless Surya Namaskars, down dogs, and pranayamas galore? Well, these are their stories, and mine. I'm Rebecca Sebastian, a 20-year yoga teacher, 10-year yoga therapist, yoga studio owner, and co-founder of a yoga-focused nonprofit. I've done a lot in the yoga world over the last 20 years. Pretty much everything except had a water cooler. You know, a place to share stories, talk about struggles, successes, and find other people who do the same thing that I do. Welcome to Working in Yoga, a podcast and substitute water cooler for yoga folks to connect and build community, to share our unique profession, our challenges, and our journeys with the world. Hey friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Can I just tell y'all how much I am loving recording this series on creativity and yoga? First, I don't think I fully appreciated just how many creative individuals I actually know in real life. This series undoubtedly has the most amount of people whom I know personally in the real world from any series I've done so far. And that made me pause to be both grateful for my luck and grateful for my skill in curating people around me who inspire me to be creative. Julia Andrini is one such human. She works as a professional musician and yoga teacher, and we talk about how creativity often comes with restrictions of one kind or another. Those restrictions, very often, can be the source of creative inspiration. It kind of made me think of this story of a study that someone told me about, what feels like a long time ago, and that I recently learned through research is a bit of an urban legend in psychology and education circles. But it does have some grounding in real life. Let me tell you about it. It's a Greek study called Fences of Childhood, Challenging the Meaning of Playground Boundaries in Design. And it came out in 2019-2020. It essentially says this: on unfenced or open playgrounds, children tend to stay closer to the adult or teacher that they came with and were reluctant to stray. And when an enclosing boundary, like a fence, was present, children were observed to spread out, run around, and engage in more independent exploration. So the hypothesis is that the fence functioned as a visible, legible limit that supported safe risk-taking and exploration for children. This idea appears in this study and in multiple design and education write-ups that reference similar observations. I'm honestly really glad that I researched this study a bit before I told you about it, because the original narrative that I was told was summarized that children huddled in the center of a playground when no fence was present and felt free to explore when there was one present. But this 2019 study adds some nuance to this that I kind of wanted to talk about. For example, fences that you can see through, like a chain link fence, are what made the children more comfortable exploring. And the study also actively challenges this idea of fences as barriers to keep out certain kinds of things. Often, without saying it, to keep out certain kinds of children who are poor or of marginalized population status. And that really made me think about this idea of building a box that you can think outside of. Perhaps the structure to be creative works best when you know there is more to be had on the other side of your limitations. Now, if you want to think more deeply about creativity and questions like the one I asked as part of your yoga teaching, and you can think alone or with a group, make sure that you check out the show notes of this podcast or head to www.workinginyoga.com/discussion guide to snag the downloadable discussion guide for this series. Also there, you can sign up for my newsletter in the show notes and head to the podcast shop to snag a pre-order of my new magazine coming out called Inside Yoga. It's a digital trade publication for yoga professionals. And I would be so grateful if you would like, subscribe, or follow the pod from wherever you're listening. And I have one final note on this episode before we get started. Julia and I chat and then wrap up our conversation, and then as what happens often, we started talking again and talking about creativity so deeply that I pressed resume so that you could all have a listen to what we were talking about. So you'll hear us wrap up the episode and then have Julia's voice pop back on to talk more about the creative process. And as usual, it's always those final moments where things get really juicy. So, without any further ado, here is my conversation with Julia Andrini. Friends, welcome to Working in Yoga. Okay, so this is like my legitimate in real life. I know her from the real world, Julia Andrini. Will you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
Yes, I shall. Hi,
Hey.
everybody. My name is Julia, and I am a yoga teacher based in Cedar Falls, Iowa. And I am also a violinist. I am a music specialist at a local nursing home. I play for various weddings, events, things like that. As far as music goes, I also play in the Waterloo Cedar Falls Symphony. And then, as far as yoga teaching, I have had the wonderful pleasure of getting to teach at some slightly more non-conventional places, which is probably the thing I think I've gotten creative with the most as far as creativity in yoga. And I'm sure we'll hit on that later.
I told you this before we hit record too, but I'm so excited to have you on this series to talk about the intersection of creativity and yoga teaching. So I've now, because you're like my third recording, so every time everybody they're all gonna hear like this was the first subject that I really like went down a rabbit hole on in the yoga spaces. I was like, I feel like my job is very creative, but we don't frame it that way.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? So can you frame like what you think creativity is? Because you're an expert, right? Like you're literally a professional musician, like literally a creative for a job. And how like you see that might intersect with like us.
Yes. So I think as far as creativity in yoga and kind of comparing it to creativity as a musician, um, it's a little interesting. It's hard to wrap my brain around at first, and I'm sure you'll find a little bit of vagueness in the way I say things because I am not a black and white and prescriptive person. But I find creativity in the yoga space can be effortless based on the nature of what we do, just like as a musician. But I also feel like creativity in the yoga space can be oddly challenging based on w- some of the boxes that we might need to put ourselves in, or the boxes that we
Mm.
have put ourselves in. And
Yeah.
that also kind of parallels with being specifically a classical musician. Yes.
Ooh, there's tension there,
There's
isn't there?
tension.
Yes, I find that too, especially as we talk about like yoga in maybe a more traditional sense, right? Like, so there
Yeah.
can be a lot of freedom in like movement science and all that. Like, you can move your body in a thousand ways. Dancers do that.
Yeah.
But there's like a tension that we intersect with. And you find that also in performing classical music?
I 100% do. So just like there are many different styles of yoga, and then there is kind of like yoga as its broad spectrum. There are also many different styles of music. And most instruments can, I think, but especially when you play an instrument that has been utilized in so many different types of music. And I'm so thankful. I was just talking to my friend Kara about this yesterday. I am so thankful to be a very versatile musician in the sense that I can play classical. And I can play pop things. And the stuff that I do at the nursing home is a wee bit of music education or edutainment, if you will. And also coming up with things to help residents feel their best, to maybe soothe them on a frustrating day, make them happier, or help them reminisce. Um, it's um, it's a hard one. I'm stumbling over words because it's quite challenging, I guess. Being a
What tension?
classical, huh?
Oh, I was gonna say, like, what tension do you feel?
So as a classically trained musician, I'll start with the musician person. As a
Yeah.
classically trained musician, which most people think of the violin as a classical instrument playing classical music. When I was growing up, and all of my wonderful, beloved teachers, generally, you are expected to play a certain style of music in a certain way to fit the time period, to fit the composer and how they intended it to be played and sound and received. So you're kind of put in a box in that nature. And then, as far as yoga in the more traditional context, which does not always get brought out in every single yoga class or setting, uh, it's a wee bit of a box as well.
Yeah.
And as it perhaps should be, but I feel like the box is getting a little bit translucent. There's the appreciation and attribution of traditional yoga, but then we have yoga as we have it now, kind of in the mainstream, I guess, for better or for
Yeah.
worse. That um, it can be challenging as someone who knows and has experienced and studied a more traditional style of yoga to be creative in the way that modern yoga classes, marketing, and presentation require.
Yeah. I mean, I find that to be very true. I came from my first yoga teaching was a 200-hour taught by an Iyengar teacher. She
Okay.
studied with Iyengar, right? You can't get really much more structured unless you're looking at like a Baptiste power yoga or Ashtanga or like Bikram. Like really, those are very structured traditions.
Yeah.
I mean, to some degree, I found the box to be a little bit freeing. Like, you know your boundaries, right? So you can play wildly within the boundaries that are provided
Yeah.
until those boundaries become restrictive. Is that sort of the same way that like you experience classical music too? Like there is a boundary of how it has to sound. We all know how, like a particular suite sounds or something like that. Do you find that too?
I would say so, yes. And especially kind of later on when I was tackling some more well-known and challenging pieces, the style that I interpreted them in was not necessarily the style that my teacher thought that I should be interpreting
Yeah.
them in. And I find that especially within the scope of string instruments, because they are older for sure. And a lot of the older music that we are playing has those rules and boundaries and boxes placed around them by, historians and teachers and appreciators and enthusiasts. Um, but I find when you get to some more modern music, this is something that I've talked with my husband about. He's a percussionist, and there was not percussion ensemble or percussion solo music until much, much, much later. And as far as I understand, not being a percussionist, just married to one, there's a lot more up for interpretation. And modern music in general, it is now being written in a way that there's so much interpretation left up to the musician that it's kind of intimidating. And
Yeah.
it's almost like the box is gone. And I like the way you put that. You have the safety of the box. You have your guidelines, parameters you can play within the box. When we
Yeah.
take away the box, it's a little scary out there. And that leaves room for things to be wrong and not necessarily an objective way. It can
Yeah.
be wrong in a subjective way because someone just didn't like the way you did it.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to give credit to Twyla Tharp, who wrote a very amazing book on creativity, which is where
Yeah.
I stole that analogy from. She always says, like in her book, it's just one of those things that I read, and it's like been with me for a decade and a half now. Is you can't think outside the box until you build the box,
Hmm.
and I was like, "Oh, that makes total sense because then there's a structure which you can push against, which allows for creative thinking and expression to happen." And I think that's true in yoga too. So can we like pull that thread and jump it into like how you teach yoga? Do you find the same thing going on in like a yoga space?
I do, to a certain extent, but then I feel like I give myself the liberty to play a bit more in yoga than I do
Hmm.
in music because when I kind of came into the yoga world, I'm 36. Still started practicing when I was pretty young, younger than I am at the moment. And it was kind of, you're laughing. It was a little bit of that switch point where like some more boutique-y type studios were popping up. It's
Yeah.
when hot yoga kind of got going. We're in the Midwest together, so like we're not in
Yes.
Chicago, we're not in New York, we're not in LA. When hot yoga studios started popping up in the Midwest, and to take something from your podcast that I just listened to this morning on the challenges of having a small yoga studio, um, things were not there were still some devoted Ashtanga, there still are still some devoted Iyengar studios, but now you kind of have the one size fits and serves all model.
Yep. Yep.
So I came in knowing the previous kind of dynamic and also being in and then thrust into the new dynamic. So I think I have a little bit more flexibility of mind as far as what the yoga industry, modern yoga versus traditional, like, can I play? Am I allowed to think outside the box? Can I still honor the tradition of yoga? More so than I do music, because music has been ingrained in myself since like 5 years old of I'm supposed to play this a very specific way.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of glad I became more familiar and started practicing with yoga when I did, because I know what it was and I know what it is, and I saw how it changed. Um,
Yeah.
and I will definitely say I am one to seek out additional modalities to combine in a yoga practice, which not everybody is for. That is
True.
blasphemous for some. And I still would like to think that I am able to bring it back to what we would consider to be some semblance of a traditional yoga practice, respecting it. But I guess we fit in another box when you think about when you're teaching at a studio and you kind of have to fit into the studio's dynamic
Yes.
or risk not necessarily changing, but maybe not fully assimilating to the studio dynamic or seeing the studio dynamic change around you. Um, what I think I've been working on recently is how do I stay true to the style that I enjoy teaching in, that I feel comfortable teaching in? Can I be creative in a way that people who like novelty and need novelty
Yep.
enjoy it without totally bastardizing it? Can I say that
Yeah.
on here?
Yeah, you totally can.
Okay, cool. I don't know, that was long-winded, but that's where my brain is at as far as creativity goes. I feel like there's a box and I feel like there's a desire to be creative, and it and at the same time I kind of have to get creative with the way I'm being creative. So I
Yeah.
don't disrupt the balance of my own mind and desires, and also, you know, stay relevant in what people want
Totally.
to do.
Totally. I mean, this is something that and it's interesting, actually. I think you're also the perfect person to sort of have this conversation with because you're a good bridge here. Amongst studio owners, we're talking about this tension that we feel of needing to have what's like considered a consistent brand at a studio, like to know what people know what they expect when they come to take a class from from a particular studio, right? Like that's good for business. It means we all have jobs and can pay our bills. But there's a tension between that and wanting to give your teachers the freedom to teach wildly. Like,
Mhm.
and I do consider myself when I came up to be really lucky to have been at a place that didn't give a shit if I brought in a big box of like river rocks and I was like, we're all going to sit on river rocks today and see how that feels. And we're going to wake up, you know what I mean? Like, I taught at a place that she just didn't care and she just let me do whatever as long as I had people in my class. But there is a tension there. And I know you have been involved in the management of a studio while not being in the ownership role necessarily.
Mhm.
Like, do you see that tension too, like in those spaces?
I am so thankful that I feel like my desire to rein in the creativity in order to be palatable has been entirely self-imposed.
Nice.
Yeah. Sarah, our previous owner at New Dawn Yoga in Cedar Falls, never. And initially, when I started teaching there, it was definitely like a go, go, go vibe.
Yeah.
And I,
Yeah.
I was not really a go, go, go teacher or person or practitioner. And she said, no, teach your yoga. Teach what you want to teach. But I don't teach like the other teachers here. She's like, I don't care. I want you. I want the way you teach. I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah.
And that was still something that was challenging to overcome. And then Anna, our current owner, is very much the same way. Like she wants to know what we're doing in order to best describe and title a class so that
Yeah.
yes, people know what they can expect. They know what they're coming to, but she does not put people in boxes either, which is so fantastic. I think the self-imposed factor is the desire to probably, yeah, fit in and not disrupt
Yeah.
the balance. But yeah, that gets challenging. It's hard. And as you know, what has been the vibe at our own studio and through the yoga world over the past 20 years or so, um, it's interesting to see it change in a way that you don't really want to change. And
Yeah.
then also kind of have to adapt the tiniest bit, but then at the same time also refuse and make sure that you're doing what feels true to your teaching style and your own practice.
Like, if I was to say creativity as a yoga teacher, where do you feel like that creativity would come from as you were teaching? Like, how does that express itself?
I enjoy tailoring a practice for the physical benefit sometimes and for the energetic benefit sometimes and
Yeah.
to teach a specific theme sometimes. It just kind of depends on
Yeah.
what it is. But then I I think I find creativity in um, how I can try to combine them. Like
Ooh.
how can I teach this heated vinyasa class and also make it mindful and maybe include a little bit of additional mobility and pranayama and a solid guided portion and restful portion of shavasana. Can can I fit it in?
That's a
Or do
lot.
it's so much and I can't. Can or what pairings am I going to do today? So I think style and emphasis is one way that I use creative liberty. I find it interesting that steal my flow or use my flow, hashtag
Yeah.
my flow
Yeah.
is a thing. And
Yeah.
I kind of like it because I think it offers inspiration. If,
Yeah.
especially if you are a newer teacher, you feel like you're kind of stuck in a rut as far as your movement practice and teaching goes. Um, but I I enjoy practicing something if I enjoy what someone else has presented, and
Yeah.
then making sure I'm presenting it in a way that is authentic to how my body moves, the information that I have through my practice, and then also ways that the people I am guiding are going to receive it. Um, which I feel like that's kind of been the general progression of how yoga has changed.
Yeah. I agree.
Someone seeing something, experiencing something, appreciating it, and then adapting it to a way that works for them.
Yeah.
But then that's also the conundrum, right?
Yeah.
And why we've gone in so many different directions.
Yeah, and some of them not so great, some of them problematic, undeniably so.
Hmm.
I'm curious, do you feel like any of your teaching, like when you're in a class, are you prepping out that whole class? Like, do you have like your notebook with all of your things, because the joke I've been making is like creativity oftentimes for teachers happens the minute they forget their notebook the first time, and like you have to go with the flow of the people in the room. Do you find that to be true for you as well?
100%. Yeah. I remember the first time I forgot my notebook and it was terrifying. I can see the room I was teaching in, and I would write out every single sequence, stick
Yeah, same.
figures, everything, which I think
Yeah,
most
yeah, yeah.
people do right away,
Yeah.
right?
Uh-huh.
And then I kind of just started to scribble down words and themes
Yep.
and have a guideline. When someone asks how I frame an asana practice, it's my response is usually, well, I've created all of these puzzle pieces and then I put the puzzle pieces together. So generally, and I would say probably at least two-thirds of folks sign up on our studio software, and I can see who's coming to a class that
Yeah.
morning, or as I'm leaving work and start to formulate what am I going to do today for these people, and it can be a crapshoot sometimes because I could have a theme for the week that I have in mind that fits what's going on in the world and things that I would assume people might want or need to hear or move in certain ways. And I can see who signed up, or the people that walk in the door are a completely different set of folks than I planned for.
Yeah.
And I think the planning on the fly or adapting on the fly, I think you have to have that. But I think going into it with a theme and a thought of what you are going to be presenting is pretty vital.
Yeah, I mean, like, if we take this back to your music analogy, right? Like,
Mhm.
you're never going to walk into a performance and be like, play classical music. Like, the scope of what that could be is so gigantic that you would almost shut yourself down, going, well, I don't know, am I going to play Rachmaninoff? Am I going to play Beethoven? Am I going to play Bach? Like, who am I going to play?
Hmm.
So you have to have some kind of something to start with. I always found like when I was theming out my classes, the least creative themes were things that were from the physical body. Like
Hmm.
if somebody said, I'm going to do shoulders, I was like, oh, I don't give a fuck where your shoulders are. Just
Yeah.
drop them,
Yes.
probably,
Stop
maybe.
holding them. Whatever shape you're holding
Yeah,
them, stop holding them. Yes.
yeah. But I do think there, like, this is a good thing. Like this talk about theming. Do
Hmm.
you theme everything? And do you theme in when you're like practicing music? Do you do the same thing?
Ooh. So I would say I generally follow some sort of theme for the season.
Okay.
I enjoy Ayurveda very much, and I enjoy
Yeah.
applying those principles. Um, so I would say my theme as far as energy goes, I enjoy theming things for a Langana practice or a Brahmana practice. I enjoy the pranavayus as far as themes that have been laid out for us, systems
Yeah.
that are already in the yoga philosophy and yoga practice that um, I can kind of pick and choose from, depending
Yeah.
on how we're feeling, how everyone is walking in the room, or however the world might feel in that given day.
Yeah.
So those ones, I would say I still stick to traditional themes and still use traditional methods of moving ourselves in the direction of those themes. And then I think the creativity kind of comes in when I incorporate maybe not as traditional ways of adding to the practice.
Yeah.
If
Such
that makes sense.
as, yeah, talk about like not as traditional because I remember being obsessed with Feldenkrais for a little bit. Like
Oh,
Feldenkrais,
yeah.
yeah, right. Like I feel like we all go through this weird like body movement obsession of like trying to figure out what movement modalities are better than us
Right.
and then pulling them into our classes. I did that too for a while.
Yeah.
Like how does that what other like non-traditional things would you say you would pull into a class?
I enjoy non myofascial release a
Oh
lot.
yeah. Oh, that's a good
So
one.
that I find will help support the physical postures that we're using in that class, or over the long term, helping support the physicality in order for people to have more comfort in their practice. I would say one of the most important things for me is the comfort and safety. If we're
Oh,
working
okay.
to maybe different expressions of different shapes, or maybe working on some sort of stable transition, what is going to support us in the long run? Posture is very important to me as well to incorporate. Also, just noticing how heavy my shoulders feel when I attempt to take a
Yeah.
meditative seat.
Yeah.
Um, you can't have comfort and ease in the body if the physical body does not feel well. That is, well, you can. You can. We do not have to be ableist, and we certainly should not be ableist and should not assume that some sort of meditation practice is only going to occur in a body that is completely comfortable.
So, do you do the same thing with your music?
It depends on the setting.
Okay.
Yes, I would say so. Well, music, again, you kind of have your boxes depending on the
More
style.
rigid?
More, so many. Well, it's complicated. You
Say
have
more.
classical, yes, okay. You
Okay.
have classical music, and that is a broad term.
Yeah.
You might have popular music. You might have jazz. You have things. I'm at a delightful family band with my husband, my father, and another gentleman, and we play ragtime xylophone music. As a
What?
Yes, as a xylophone, a bass saxophone, a violin, and then our non-family member, though we very much claim him, Dave, switches from banjo to piano, depending on the tune. So you
That's
have,
delightful.
that's probably maybe the best example that I have is that predates jazz. That's kind of where jazz came from in a way.
Yeah.
So in this last concert set that we did, Matt had some of his students come and play with us. And one lovely student, I adore them all, but one lovely student who I adore, she does jazz vibraphone, and she's taking with a jazz vibraphone teacher, and she said it's really kind of interesting. Like the chord changes are different, and the rhythm is just different enough that like her jazz training was getting in the way of ragtime, but then she went to go solo at jazz band in the same week or the next week, I don't remember. And the ragtime that she'd been doing kind of creeped its way in to jazz.
That's got to be the same thing we experience though in yoga as well. Like, I mean, for the amount of times that somebody's going to tell me that you don't need to point your toes to the direction on one side of your mat, I will still always be like, you've got to flip this foot out to 90 degrees. And I know
Mhm.
that my hips don't have to be square to the side of the mat. Are they when I practice? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
We still have certain guidelines and certain things that are familiar in different styles of music, similarly to what you would find in different types and styles of a yoga practice.
Okay, so if somebody wants to get more creative as a yoga teacher, or even just in their own practice first and then as a teacher, like what elements do you suggest that they do to like get more creative? I mean, we've talked a little bit about, that moment of forgetting your notebook. Pretty much everybody so far I've talked to has said the moment that you look up, that you're present in the room, creativity happens.
Hmm.
What other things do you think people can do to support, like, because your whole life, girl, is wildly creative. I mean, I didn't even know you had a band, a ragtime band.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's a lot of fun.
So, what can people do if they want to nurture that sort of creative side of teaching?
One thing I have tried to do is take influences from the world
Yeah.
and take influences from art to
Ooh,
experience more feeling. Finding joy has been something I think perhaps a lot of us have been struggling with over the past couple of years. The world is a funny place. Um,
sure is.
get out of your comfort zone as far as things that you are experiencing and consider how other people might experience things as well. If I look at some sort of art that somebody has made, I might not understand what they saw or the title of the piece how it pertains to the art that I am looking at, but that meant something to somebody else. I think taking other influences, not in the scope of yoga and not in the scope of music, can overall help your creativity of a human being and kind of open your view of how other people can experience things. Um,
Yeah.
just like in a yoga practice, people are going to experience things in different ways. One thing that could be so wonderful, whether it's something that's being said, some type of pranayama practice, some sort of visualization, meditation, or movement. Different people with different experiences are going to have different reactions, or maybe not to be, cause and effect, but also different result, not in a goal to achieve or feel a certain way, but things just happen. Certain pranayama practices drive me into extreme anxiety, and I
Yeah.
can't do them, and they might be other people's favorite. So kind of changing how you see other people and the things that they make, knowing that they can have a different influence and different outcome than you would. But also, I think having a specific person or a specific idea in mind that is not in your comfort zone,
Ooh,
which
say
almost
more.
which almost goes against um as I just listened to your podcast today, almost goes against who is your desired attendee or clientele or student.
Yeah.
You can get so comfy with teaching to a certain group of people that when somebody different walks in, you don't know what to do. Whether they might be of a different background,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe they do not speak your language. So, usually using different types of cues that are more simple could be necessary. Having somebody walk in that is not what we would consider um, to be an able-bodied human.
Yep.
Can you adapt?
Yeah.
I think the creativity needs to happen before you have to be creative. And the only way we do that is if we kind of give ourselves a challenge to do so. It gets so comfy to teach the same way, doing the same thing all the time. I think that's why I enjoy bringing in things like myofascial release. I also love teaching yin yoga.
Yeah.
We were talking in the beginning about the difficulty of a bio and having to read someone's bio of all of the certifications that they were
Yeah.
ever done. I was definitely a certification seeker, and
We've all been one.
oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
feel like it's part of the process, man. Um, but you can seek out a different modality that might benefit a different group of people. I also teach yoga to the UNI, University of Northern Iowa women's swimming and diving team. So that is definitely going to be athletic themed. That is going to be
Yeah.
asana physical care themed. However, I know what it is like to be a college student.
Yeah.
So most of that, I really felt like I had to get creative using something that would be a benefit to them physically, but then also, again, including the pieces that would support them through semester changes and moving from a high school student to a freshman, and then having some of the most wonderful conversations where I think I have had the most impact with the seniors that are graduating or have recently graduated, kind of life path, dharma, purpose,
Yeah.
identity, who you
Yeah.
are, incorporating all of those into something that has been put into a box of physical self-care and a little bit of cross training too.
I think you've said something that I'm realizing now. Everybody so far that I've interviewed for the series has really said the same thing. Like everybody so far who was excited to talk about creativity or had some understanding of what the creative process is, teaches a gigantic range of human beings. And you pushed into this idea that we have to embrace discomfort in order to get better and more creative, like teach people who are outside of your comfort zone.
Mhm.
And I agree with you so wholeheartedly. And I think it just makes you better as a teacher. If you have to struggle through, and my joke has always been like, there are three groups that you should unflinchingly say yes to teaching if you've never done it before. One is small children. The second is older adults. I know, girl. Like I have kids and kids still like my joke is always I have children, I don't teach children.
Yeah.
But I have taught children, and that experience is different and very creative and pushes your skill set and your ability to hold attention and energy in a like new way. Like you learn how to run a room really well if you have a group of kids. Older adults will force you to take criticism in a way that no other population will give you. You teach older adults, like I'm not even kidding you. I was the head yoga therapist on a research study for yoga for older adults at a university here where I live. And one of the ladies in this research study was a former labor and delivery nurse. And I was this yoga therapist, and I was pregnant with my youngest while I was doing this. And she kept saying to me, "You're going to deliver early." And I delivered a month early, and I shit you not, this 85-year-old woman called the hospital to say, "I told you so."
Oh my gosh. I love her.
And that's
Legend.
like exactly what older adults deliver to you, the ability to take feedback and not cry.
Yes. 100%.
And yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, yes. I to follow up on the older adults. So like I said in the beginning, I'm the music specialist at a nursing home in town, and there have been a couple
Mhm.
times where they have needed a sub for senior exercise, and I
Oh,
have
yeah.
jumped in with some chair yoga, and I'm so glad. I taught chair yoga for about 3 years and have that
Yeah.
experience, but those first few months were challenging.
Yeah. Yeah.
Challenging. I would say yes. Teaching a different demographic,
Yep.
especially a different attention span,
Yes.
age, attitude, propriety,
Rehab.
physical potential limitation. Yes,
Yep.
that you get creative real quick. Again, because you kind of have to. But
Yeah.
then there's also, I think it's fun to
I do too.
I think it's fun to start to adapt once I know I'm going to need to adapt. It's almost like something turns on in my brain. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Okay. How
What
do
you got?
you do this?
Yeah.
And I started out as a kids yoga teacher, and that's interesting. I am someone who does not desire to have their own kids. I love my friends' children. My friends know better than to ask me to watch their children, but
Fair.
they know if they are in a pinch, I will do it and I will love them so hard. But they don't usually ask because they know. Yeah.
Yeah.
You had a
Yeah.
third group of people.
People who are in rehab. I think people in
Mm,
rehab, because their connection to their body is very different than the rest of us. So it's folks who are generally, the typical age of yoga students, but their
mm,
connection and relationship to their body is very different, and they don't mince words. So
mm,
your instructions have to be stripped. Like, I've often been told that I have a very concise way of speaking, and I will tell you, teaching people in rehab is what made me have that skill set.
mm,
Like, you're not gonna, they don't give a shit about your stories of, like, this made me feel really relaxed, or whatever yoga story or what mythology you're sharing. Like, the look of true disdain on someone's face when you're telling them some sort of like yoga mythology story or some
mm.
meaningful story, and they're like, "Yeah, I was in jail last week." Okay.
Yeah. Knowing your audience, I mean,
Yep.
this just goes around with all of the different demographics. I mean, I think it can be the demographic that you're teaching, the point in their lives they're in. It can be the specific studio or specific location. Yes. I mean, you have to get creative in certain settings, especially when you're not used to being in them.
So, how do you nurture the creative process in yourself? You mentioned like you're looking at art and absorbing art. Like, is there something that you're doing that gets your brain more of a creative state that other people can do too if you want to like come into a class and feel more creative? Are there things that you do, like rituals or things? Have a rabbit's foot, maybe? I don't know.
Gosh,
What do you
that's
do,
a good
Julia?
question. I don't know. Man, I tell you, Rebecca, being a musician and a yoga teacher, unfortunately, does not always leave me a whole lot of transition time.
Yeah, that's fair.
I wish I could have this huge routine around, getting into the creative process. I would say for me, the biggest thing in trying to kind of bring back my time and energy in order to be creative in the things that I do is creating time.
Ooh, yes. Say more.
That's not necessarily a ritual, but making sure I have time for creativity. I don't remember who I was talking to a few weeks ago, but essentially we were referring to the same thing where when you run yourself ragged and you're saying yes to doing all of these things, and sometimes we are in a season that we just have to do that.
Yeah.
Um, you have to say no to something you might want or maybe slightly financially need to say yes to in order to have that time to actually be creative, to not be actively participating in something and to have time to sit, to have time to get bored, and to have time to play.
Yeah.
I the other day I sent a text message to my friend Sarah, who originally owned the studio. I used to play at the studio. I used to play. I'm sitting in my yoga room right now. I used to just play and move and read things, and I would sit in a pile of my books. I love books. It's a problem.
Same.
I would sit in a pile of my books and look up some sort of term or look up, um, knowing that this type of pranayama was in this book, but it was also in this book. Oh, but I remember I read that yoga and Ayurveda book, and this had something a little different. I would just sit in a pile of my books and I would
Yeah.
draw conclusions between different time periods, different authors. That's one thing I like to do with the different modalities too, is yes, see what this modality says about this specific thing. I have a book called Spirited Wind Playing, and it's breathing for woodwinds, woodwind players
Huh.
that my friend Kayla, who's a bassoon professor in Colorado, she recommended. And that has been very interesting. But um, I digress. Having time to play.
I mean,
The
because one of
rabbit
the
hole.
things I'm hearing is you're saying creativity is a choice. You have to make the choice to make space to be creative. That's a choice you're making.
I at least personally do. I'd be
Yeah.
curious to see if other people do as well. And I think it is also probably the life that I have and just kind of how I've been over the past couple years as well, which has been tired and burnt out. I'm trying to not be the burnt out yoga teacher. And
Yeah.
part of that has been leaving time and opportunity to be inspired and get creative. But I had to have time to do so. I think most of us, the general progression is to accumulate how many certifications and feel so overly competent by the sheets
Yep.
of paper and continuing education we've done. And then part of it is saying yes to absolutely everything, maybe out of necessity, but taking all of the gigs, music as well, taking all
Yeah.
of the things. I'm going to do all of the things. Why am I teaching 18 yoga classes? That was 2019, Julia. We are not that Julia anymore. But somehow I found myself back up to 10.
Yeah.
I love that for me. But
Yeah.
they are different styles with different demographics, and that I do love. But yeah, I think you have to make the choice to leave yourself time and energy in order to be creative. I do think it's a choice. That's why I like to go to different art exhibits around town. Part of that is making time for me to go see how other people have been creative. I like to observe
Yeah.
other people being creative so much because then I feel like I take some inspiration from that and I can either, compare it to a piece or use it when I'm talking to somebody at the nursing home or apply it to a class that I'm teaching. I
Yeah.
love little anecdotes of personal experience and finding little pieces of yoga out in the world and then sharing them because maybe someone else has a similar or different experience, or it just inspires them to do something similar.
Yeah, that's such a good way for us to end. So I want you to tell me how anybody can find you and become obsessed with you and your work, should they so choose.
Goodness gracious. So yes, Julia Andrini on, that's so funny. I'm pretty sure that's my Instagram handle, right? Is it just my name?
I think it is.
I think it is. It's Julia.Andrini. Hard
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Julia.Andrini on Instagram. I do have a Julia Andrini yoga Facebook page. I am not on it much as
Do
some of
you
me
really?
leaving time. I do. I haven't
I
posted on it in a long time. Part of me having time and energy for creativity is not being on social media.
yeah.
And that's been
Social
great.
media is work for me.
Yeah. But if you do send me a message, I will generally respond. I do have a website as well. You can find me at juliaandrini.com. And I have my schedules up there as well. We didn't dig into it much, but that's all right. I've done events out at Hartman Reserve Nature Center as well. I do events out at Cedar Rock. It's one of the Frank Lloyd Wright houses in Iowa. It's a signed house in Quasqueton. And then out at Three Pines Farm, which is actually where my husband and I got married. So
Oh,
those are some ways I guess I incorporate creativity too, is going to different locations and
yeah.
creative with those.
Thank you so much for this conversation. This is so good.
You're so welcome. I'm happy to be on here.
Yay. Okay, this is a bonus add-on to Julie Andrini's podcast episode because we just kept talking. Like, and here's what Julia just said to me. She said, I had this idea we were going to talk about the creative evolution of yoga throughout the years, the way music has creatively evolved throughout the years. And she did the super cool, like flowy thing with her hands. And she said, like, we go from classical and then we come up to ragtime and jazz, and then you get into the 50s and things explode, and there's so many variations of music. And then I said, do you feel like yoga did the same thing? And she said, oh, hell yeah. And I said, hold on, let me press record. So now, how do you see that yoga did that too?
Okay, so yes, I feel like, and I wasn't alive at the time, so I'm not sure how everything evolved. Fun fact, I am 36. So I wasn't around for a lot of the music that I play. Classical music very much predates when I was born. And then the music that I play at the nursing home, generally I'm playing things from the 20s, 30s, 40s. But now that I'm getting people that are a wee bit younger, maybe they're just coming for, a week or 2 week stint for recovery. They're not necessarily live in residence. We're getting into like the 60s and the 70s where different styles of music totally exploded. And you have so many offshoots, like the family tree is absolutely bonkers. I did the wiggly thing with my hands again that you can't see. I'm
She
so
did.
sorry. There's not a visual for that, but yoga, I feel, and I am not a yoga historian, so someone else might be able to better attest to this, but there were different paths
Yeah,
initially. And there are different schools of yoga, thoughts of yoga, lineage, whatever terminology you want to use. And then we get up to, as I mentioned before, kind of what we're going to consider and say modern yoga, which
yeah,
I'm very thankful the point that I jumped in head first, deep dive into the yoga world, which is kind of during the transition, I feel like, to current modern yoga.
yeah,
And you have so many different styles now that have come out from Ashtanga yoga that are
yep.
Ashtanga inspired, like Rocket and other Rocket yoga.
Rocket.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hold on. I'm writing that down so I can Google that later, but carry
Yes.
on.
Rocket yoga is very similar, as far as my understanding goes, to the Ashtanga series, in which there are multiple series. And it's kind of a modern adaptation of it. I have not studied it, so I can't speak much on that. There's a gentleman in Iowa that has kind of coined his own sort of Ashtanga adaptation as well.
The
And
dude in Des Moines, right?
Des Moines, yeah.
Yeah.
He has had some students as well that have kind of evolved their own styles out of his that was initially Ashtanga inspired, as I feel like a lot of modern yoga, asana-based practices have been. But I mean, you have yin yoga, which is, for my understanding, from Pauly Zink, actually, no, Pauly Zink. Yeah, Pauly Zink, not Paul Grilly. He's the other one.
Yeah.
Came from his understanding of Chinese medicine and nature and not meridians. So this is where creativity kind of goes wild, and we get all of
Yeah.
these offshoots of different styles of yoga based on someone's interpretation of yoga, aligning it with their background or their other thought, philosophy, system, belief, what have you. There are so many different interpretations of vinyasa yoga and hatha yoga that we would
Yeah.
think, oh, there's like just one definition for that, right? No, no, not at all. Yin yoga has different, I mean, it's, I would say that that's kind of a, hasn't been codified really because there are so many different teachers that have so many different takes on it. You can have the fascia take, you can have the
Yep.
mobile polyzinc movement, dragonfly flap your wings, where you've got Paul Grilly and you've got,
Yeah.
oh man, who's the other guy who wrote Your Body, Your Yoga?
Oh, Bernie Clark.
Tony Clark is
Yeah.
another modern yin yoga gentleman.
Yep.
Sarah Powers. There are so many different takes, and part of me wonders, were they just being creative, or did they feel like something was missing? Were they trying to adapt it, or did they think they understood it better than
That's a good question
how it was
because
being taught? Yeah.
we don't question that in music, right? Music is rife for adaptation. We go, obviously, you're going to adapt and riff off of what you're hearing to make whatever it is your own. We understand that to be a creative process in music.
Mm-hmm.
We're real pissed about that in yoga, though.
Yes. Yeah, that's I think the upholding the tradition and philosophy of yoga and every part of it, not just asana, that gets challenging because
Yeah.
creativity can be seen as that, to quote myself earlier, bastardization
Yeah.
of the yoga practice. But in a way, that's how yoga has evolved from when they were siddhis outside
Yeah.
of the city, starving themselves, covering themselves in the walking through the cemeteries and bathing in the ashes of the funeral pyres. We don't do that anymore.
No, I mean, like inherently, we consider spirituality to be a creative practice.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, I would like nobody. There's nothing prescriptive about spirituality or prayer. If you were going to go and like that is a creative expression of whatever you're feeling towards whatever feeling you project towards the divine.
Yeah.
Say, like, but we don't frame yoga that way, the way that we frame music that way or
Right.
art that way. And I feel like maybe we should, because like there's something missing to the experience of teachers. And I think teachers would be a lot more attentive and interesting if we encourage them to be creative, don't you?
I think so. I think that's where I get stuck in a box is having an awareness around, how modern yoga is seen and practiced and interpreted, and trying to not do that, but also again trying to not just teach from books and texts and trainings that were developed very much not for this day and age.
Yeah.
We have a completely different world. We have completely different lives. We have completely different needs. In a sense, creativity and adapting yoga practice, yoga philosophy, how it's seen and practiced, has kept it alive and has modernized it in a way that suits who we are and how we are. But also,
Yeah.
have we gotten so far away from it? I don't know.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
hard. It's a conundrum.
it is. But the thing I love about us, though, is that we want to talk about those conundrums. Because I do think yoga people on the whole, while the public perception is we're all barefoot, we smell like patchouli, and we're high. Like,
Hmm.
I think the reality in the industry is very different. Like, we are weirdly, I think for the fact that we get paid like 4 cents a day, like, we are weirdly intelligent.
Yeah.
So, like, we're all nerdy as shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Well, and the adaptability, pardon, that we have to have, and then your creativity goes into it to again be able to meet those other demographics that we're not always seeing. And
Yeah.
then maybe we fall in love with working with a different demographic, and then we
Yep.
dive all the way into that. I mean, I think, yeah, the amount of ways we've had to adapt and also learn how to be marketers and also
Yeah.
potentially business owners, operators, managers, helpers. Like, yeah, I know you've talked about that a lot on other
Yeah.
podcasts, the business of yoga, working in yoga. Yeah.
I mean, I just want to say before I stop recording and Julie and I go back to like chatting about our lives, that shout
Mm.
out to Jeevana Heyman, because Jeevana the other day essentially framed modifications of traditional yoga postures as a creative act. So shout out to Jeevana for that, because we fucking agree. Thank you.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for this conversation, Julia. Here are our key takeaways. First, oh my gosh, the tension. How do we deal with the tension between honoring yoga's roots and being creative as professionals? I find there is, in fact, tension to be had. How do we honor the tradition of yoga, the needs of our students, and also the desire to be a creative individual within the work of sharing yoga? I know some folks will say quickly, but honoring the needs of our students is honoring yoga, which is both true and kind of an obnoxious statement. Sorry. Because it isn't something that we're taught within trainings, and that isn't something that's always easy to get right. So let's just leave it at that. There is tension here, tension between creativity and honoring yoga's roots, and sometimes a little bit of tension does us well. Next, as Julia referenced, versatility is something that can feed creativity. I think this is true in yoga as well as musicianship. Sometimes we get so dialed into just doing one thing, be it one class style, one niche, or one particular kind of student, that it actually can make us a bit more stale in our teaching. Adding some versatility or variety to your teaching and client roster can inspire a new perspective and a fresh way to approach the work that you do. Look, y'all, it isn't a coincidence that some 120-ish episodes into this podcast, I should say, that I have never had a person come on who specializes in teaching people how to niche down. And there have absolutely been people who have pitched that to me. While I have had people reference it on the podcast, I personally kind of resist this idea for us for a lot of reasons, and creative license is one of them. Next, Julia talks about style and emphasis being part of how we can take creative liberty in our teaching. I think this is something we sort of unconsciously know, but I find it incredibly helpful to have someone put words to it. If I told 10 people to teach the same sequence of 5 poses, we all kind of know that you would get 10 very different classes, most likely. So instead of letting that be a happy accident, I'm going to encourage you to really lean into this and play with your own style and emphasis within a class series to create something totally new. Next, where is your inspiration from? Get very clear about where you get your creative inspiration. If you are on social media a lot, I'm going to encourage you to curate your feed like a museum. If you love art or cooking, which are 2 things I love passionately, interact with those content pillars so you see more of them. And then go to an art museum and take a cooking class and read books about those topics. The more you intentionally engage with creative and inspiring things, the more you will allow yourself to be creative within your own life and your yoga classes and private yoga sessions. Next, I should tell y'all, this is in all capital letters because I feel this strongly about it. I love a theme. I really cannot emphasize how I enjoy giving myself a parameter to think around for a topic. So I've referenced this story both online in my Facebook group, The Future of Yoga Therapy, and I think probably on this podcast before, but I was once a few years ago trying to work my brain around the distinction between discomfort and suffering. So my hypothesis that I was working on was that humans will often choose their own suffering to avoid their perceived discomfort. And I built a whole series of classes around this idea for like a month or two. Now, I was teaching asana and pranayama just like everyone else, but this was a topic I chose to explore through those two mediums. And it was one of the most enjoyable 8 weeks I've ever had teaching. And you too can do the same. And finally, getting into the creative process is a choice. You need to make time to be creative. Life gets so lifey, really, for all of us. We have obligations, we get tired, we're stressed, the world continues to revolve in strange and sometimes scary ways. But you can choose to have creative experiences within the parameters of your own life. It won't happen by accident, though. So make that choice to lean into your creative side weekly. Really, it will make all the difference. Okay, next week on the podcast, I have Bridget Regan talking about something that is one of my very favorite things, how business ownership is inherently creative. She has such a fresh take on how we can navigate creatively as business owners, and I know you're going to love it. Until then, as always, I am so grateful that you've spent your time and attention with me here today. So let's go get to work, and I'll catch you around the water cooler next time.